What's worse than being trapped in a blizzard that can kill you in minutes? Hearing a sound that shouldn't be there. A sound that forces you to choose between your own survival and a rescue that is almost certainly a death sentence. For Arthur Morgan, a man who had already lost everything to the Montana wilderness, that choice was about to change his world. Hello, and welcome to our channel. We search for the most compelling stories of human spirit, survival, and the shocking secrets people keep. If you love tales of resilience where nothing is what it seems, you are in the exactly right place. And if you find yourself captivated by Arthur's journey, perhaps consider subscribing so you never miss a story that makes you think. The wind came sideways, sharp enough to cut. Arthur Morgan pulled his collar high, while scratching his jaw, and urged his mare forward through a white blindness. He was checking fence lines that, in this moment, felt utterly pointless. Late March in Montana Territory had a brutal way of reminding a man who was truly in charge. It wasn't him. The blizzard didn't just blow, it howled. A high, thin scream like something animal and dying. Visibility was zero. His own cabin was only a mile behind him, but it felt 100 miles away. He was a fool to be out. He knew it. Arthur considered turning back, letting the fence go when he heard it. A child's cry, thin and desperate, cutting through the wind's own howl. He stopped his mare, listening. It couldn't be. An animal, maybe a coyote caught in the storm. He almost dismissed it. Almost. But conscience was a stubborn, heavy thing. He'd lived alone for 3 years, but he hadn't yet become a monster. He angled his mare toward the sound, squinting through the driving snow, his eyes watering from the cold. What he found stopped his heart. An overturned wagon, half buried in a drift, its canvas torn and flapping like a wounded bird. And beside it, a small boy, crouched over a woman lying motionless in the snow. "Please," the boy screamed when he saw Arthur, his voice cracking. "Please don't leave us." Arthur dismounted, his boots sinking deep into the fresh powder. The world was just wind and white and the terrifying stillness of the woman. She was unconscious, her face as pale as the snow she was disappearing into. No horses, no supplies in sight, no help coming. He knelt, pulling off his glove. He checked her pulse. Faint, but there. The boy was maybe 9 years old, shaking so hard his teeth chattered in a relentless rhythm. "She won't wake up," the boy sobbed, grabbing Arthur's coat. Is she? "Not if I can help it, son." Arthur's voice was rough from the cold and disuse. He lifted the woman. She was surprisingly light. He secured her as gently as he could across his saddle, a dead weight that was terrifyingly alive. "Hold tight to me. Do not let go, you understand?" He pulled the boy up behind the woman, feeling small, desperate arms lock around his waist like a vice. The cabin was still a mile away. In this storm, it might as well be on the moon. Arthur turned his mare back into the wind, a solid wall of ice, and pushed forward. The boy whispered prayers against his back, a frantic, mumbled litany. The woman's breathing was shallow, a tiny puff of mist that vanished instantly. 2 more mouths. The thought landed in Arthur's mind with the weight of a stone. 6 weeks of winter probably left. His stores were low. God help us all. But he didn't slow down. He just pushed forward. The cabin held warmth like a promise barely kept. The fire in the hearth was low, but it was alive. Arthur laid the woman on his own bed, the only bed. The boy hovered beside her like a small, fierce guard, refusing to be moved. "Get back, son. Let me work." Arthur's tone was firm, but not unkind. He built up the fire until it roared, the flames casting dancing shadows on the one-room cabin. He filled a tin cup with water from the kettle, adding willow bark from his meager stores. For pain. For fever. He knelt beside the woman. Ma'am, can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open. They weren't dull or confused. They were sharp and intelligent. Even through the haze of shock, she took in everything. The rough-hewn walls, Arthur's weathered face, the boy beside her. "Leo," she whispered, her voice a dry rasp. "Is Leo?" "I'm here, Grandma." The boy, Leo, gripped her hand, his knuckles white. She exhaled slowly, a shudder of relief, then immediately tried to sit up. Arthur stopped her with a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Easy. Your ankle sprained, maybe worse. But I don't think it's broken. You need rest. He offered the cup. Drink this. It'll help. She drank without question, her eyes never leaving his. She studied him with an unsettling, assessing clarity. I am Eleonora, she said, her voice stronger. This is my grandson, Leo. We are grateful for your kindness, Mr. Holloway. Arthur Holloway. He stood up, suddenly and painfully aware of how small his cabin must seem. One room, one bed, 2 chairs, and a table that had seen better years. How long must we impose upon you, Mr. Holloway? Till the thaw, Arthur said flatly. Could be 6 weeks. No one travels this country in these storms. You were lucky I found you. Eleanora's expression didn't change, but something passed behind her eyes. Not fear, not relief, calculation, resignation. Then we are in your debt. It's not debt, Arthur said, turning away. It's just what's right. He pulled the pot of venison stew from the shelf, his dinner and tomorrow's lunch, and set on the stove to heat. Leo watched him with enormous eyes, dark and solemn. Hungry, son? The boy nodded, a quick, jerky motion. Arthur ladled out 3 bowls. The portions were smaller than usual, but no one commented. Leo ate like he was starving, hunched over the bowl. Eleonora ate sparingly, her gaze moving between Arthur and the empty, dust-covered cradle in the corner. She didn't ask. Arthur was grateful. When a meal was done, he laid out the sleeping arrangements. It was simple because the choices were few. Mrs. Eleonora will take the bed. The boy gets my bedroll by the fire. I'll make do with the chair. Eleonora started to protest. Mr. Holloway, I couldn't. Arthur raised a hand, cutting her off. No arguments. You're injured, and the boy needs proper rest. It's settled. She nodded slowly, her gaze sharp again. You're a man of principle, Mr. Holloway. Just a man, Arthur said, settling into the rickety chair and pulling a blanket over his shoulders. Night settled heavy in the small cabin. The wind rattled the shutters, demanding to be let in. Leo murmured in his sleep, restless and twitching. In the darkness, lit only by the glowing embers of the fire, Eleonora's eyes found Arthur's. You've lost someone, she said. It wasn't a question. Her voice was quiet, but it carried across the small space. I can see it in you. In this room. Arthur looked at the fire, at the flames dancing over the wood. He thought of the cradle. Most folks out here have, he finally said. My husband passed 7 years ago. Her voice was steady, a statement of fact. Some winters, they never seemed tot-haw. Arthur said nothing, but her words found a mark. Until they must, he whispered back. Something in his chest, a knot that had been tight for 3 years, loosened just slightly. The fire crackled. Outside, the storm raged on. Arthur woke to the smell of coffee. Real coffee, not the chicory root he'd been stretching for months. Eleonora moved carefully around the stove, favoring her good ankle. She moved with an easy grace, as if she'd always belonged there, which was impossible. Morning, she said, not looking at him. I hope you don't mind. I found your stores. I used just a little. You should be resting, Arthur grumbled, rising stiffly from the chair. I've rested enough. Idle hands don't suit me, Mr. Holloway. Leo was already awake, sitting cross-legged by the fire, staring at Arthur. The boy was trying to solve a puzzle. Why do you live all alone? The boy asked, his voice clear in the morning quiet. Leo, Eleonora said sharply. Manners. It's all right. Arthur poured himself a cup of the precious coffee, buying time with a long sip. The warmth was a shock. It's just the way things turned out, son. And where's your family? Leo pressed. The question landed like a stone in still water. Arthur's gaze drifted, against his will, to the empty cradle in the corner. He didn't want to go back there. 3 winters ago, Eliza, heavy with child. The storm, much like this one, trapping them miles from town. The midwife couldn't reach them. Arthur had done everything he could, everything he knew, but it wasn't enough. His daughter, Sarah, lived for 3 hours. Eliza followed her by dawn. He'd buried them together under the tall pine tree behind the cabin. Some days, he still heard Eliza's voice in the wind. Some days, he wished the wind would take him too. Mr. Holloway? Eleanora's voice was gentle, pulling him back. Arthur blinked, the cabin coming back into focus. Lost them, he said, his voice rough. Long time ago. Leo's face crumpled, not with pity, but with an understanding far beyond his years. My papa died too, he whispered. Mama said he's watching from heaven. Arthur set down his cup. He looked at the boy. Then he's proud of how brave you are. Eleanora's eyes shimmered. And he'd be grateful, she added softly, for men like you, Mr. Holloway. Before Arthur could respond, the wind picked up again, a low, rising moan that set his teeth on edge. He stepped outside into the gray morning. The sky was a dark, bruised green at the edges. Another storm, he called, shutting the door. Bigger than the first, I reckon. We're not going anywhere. For 2 more days, the blizzard hammered the cabin like angry fists. Arthur braced the door with timber, showing Leo how to wedge the planks tight. Like this, Leo asked, pushing with all his small might. Just like that. Good work, son. The boy beamed, a small, sudden light in his dark eyes. Eleanora watched them from beside the stove. Her expression was unreadable, but when Arthur caught her eye, she smiled. A sad, knowing smile. The walls groaned. The shutters banged. Arthur wedged the last timber into place and stepped back. If they survived this second storm, he knew his isolation was over. He couldn't unsee their need. And, more terrifyingly, he couldn't unsee his own. The days found their pattern, like stones settling in a creek bed. Unexpected but inevitable. What Arthur doesn't know is that this small, fragile piece is about to be shattered. The secrets Eleanora is keeping are far more dangerous than the storm outside. Before we find out what happens, if you're finding value in this story of survival and secrets, I'd be so grateful if you'd hit the like button. It truly helps this story reach others who might appreciate it. 3 weeks passed. The storms finally eased, though winter still held the land in its icy grip. Snow piled high against the cabin walls. The world beyond was white silence. Inside, routines formed. In the mornings, Arthur taught Leo practical skills. How to mend harness leather with an awl and wax thread. How to split kindling with a hatchet. Short, controlled strikes. He showed him how to read the animal tracks in the snow. Rabbit, deer, coyote. The boy absorbed everything with a fierce, quiet concentration. His small, pale hands mimicked Arthur's calloused ones. Why do rabbits hop in circles sometimes? Leo asked one afternoon. Confuses predators. Arthur said, not looking up from the snare he was repairing. Makes them harder to catch. Are people like that, too? Arthur paused. He considered the question. Sometimes, when they're scared. Leo nodded solemnly, as if Arthur had just confirmed something he'd long suspected. In the evenings, Leo would read aloud from Arthur's only book, a worn Bible his mother had given him decades ago. The boy's reading was flawless, his voice clear and strong. You've had schooling, Arthur observed one night. Mama insisted on tutors, Leo said. Then his voice grew quieter. Before. He didn't finish. Eleanora, mending Arthur's coat by lamplight, glanced up but said nothing. She had proven herself invaluable. Her stitching was finer than any Arthur had ever seen. Tiny, even stitches that made his torn sleeve look new. She cooked simple ingredients, flour, dried venison, beans, into proper meals, stretching their dwindling supplies with a quiet, impressive efficiency. She never complained. She never asked for special treatment. She just moved through the cabin with a grace that suggested capability, not servitude. One evening, as Leo slept by the fire and the wind whispered outside, Eleanora set down her sewing. You never speak her name, she said softly. Your wife. Arthur's jaw tightened. He stared at the flames. May I know it? Eleanora asked. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. Then, barely audible, Eliza. Eliza, Eleanora repeated, as if testing the name. That's a kindness to her memory. And to yourself. Speaking it. Arthur nodded, unable to respond. His throat was too tight. Adelaide returned to her stitching, but something in the small cabin had shifted. A door had been opened, just a crack. Later, as they prepared for bed, Eleanora paused. We should leave soon. The thaw is coming. Arthur hung his coat on the peg. I know. Leo asks every day if we can stay. He's a good boy. He loves you, Eleanora said quietly. He feels safe here. Arthur turned, his heart hammering. Eleanora met his gaze, unflinching. Do you? Arthur asked, the words out before he could stop them. Do you feel safe? Yes, she said. No hesitation. Safer than I have felt in years. The words hung between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. Arthur wanted to ask her to stay. He wanted to beg. He wanted to tell her that the cabin felt less empty, that he felt less empty. But fear was louder than what? Fear of loss. Fear of hope. Good night, Mrs. Eleanora, he said instead, his voice rough. She smiled, a sad, knowing smile. Good night, Samuel. Spring arrived, not as a victory, but as a question. Now what? Late April brought warmer days. Icicles dripped from the eaves. Crows returned, calling from the pines. Patches of brown earth appeared through the snow like new promises. Eleanora's ankle had fully healed. She walked the property each morning, her gaze assessing. She studied the creek positioning, the soil richness, the natural grazing areas. One afternoon, she stopped beside Arthur as he repaired a section of fence. This land could be worth a great deal, she said, with proper management. Arthur shrugged. It's worth my peace. And peace is worth more than gold, she said, tilting her head. To me it is. A rare man, Samuel Holloway. Leo had grown bolder. He followed Arthur everywhere, chattering endlessly, asking questions Arthur didn't always know how to answer. Can we stay? Leo asked one evening, point blank. Arthur set down the harness he'd been oiling. Your family must be searching for you. They'll want you home. I don't care about them. The boy's face was fierce, desperate. I want to stay here, with you. Arthur's heart cracked clean through. Leo, you don't want us, Leo whispered, his eyes filling. That's why you won't say yes. That's not true. Then why? Because you deserve better than this. The words burst out of Arthur before he could stop them. You deserve a real home, a real family. Not some broken-down homesteader in the middle of nowhere. Leo stared at him. Then, quietly, you're not broken. You're the best man I know. Arthur couldn't breathe. That night, Leo had nightmares. Thrashing, crying out. Arthur was at his side before Eleanora could even rise. He held the boy, whispering reassurances, stroking his hair the way he'd imagined, for one brief, shining moment, doing for his own child. Eleanora watched from the shadows, tears streaming silently down her face. When Leo finally settled, Arthur looked up. Eleanora mouthed two words. Thank you. The next morning, she approached Arthur while Leo slept late. You're a good man, Samuel. Better than you believe yourself to be. I'm just. You've given us more than shelter. You've given Leo hope. You've given me something I thought I'd lost. What's that? Faith, she said. In humanity, in goodness, and in the possibility of starting over. You want to say it. Stay. Stay with me. Let's start over together. But the words wouldn't come. The ghost of Eliza, the fear of losing again, held him silent. Eleanora's face fell, just slightly. She pulled a folded letter from her pocket. When we leave, she said, her voice all business now, I'll need to post this. My family will be concerned. Arthur's stomach dropped. Family, wealth, position. They'll come for you, he said. It was a statement. Yes, and you'll go back to your world. Eleanora met his eyes. I don't know, she whispered, what world I belong to anymore. Arthur turned away before she could see the desolation on his face. He heard the horses before he saw them. Too many hooves for a neighborly visit. 6 riders crested the hill, moving fast. Fine horses, gleaming coats. Tailored coats, despite the trail conditions. Leo, playing outside, froze. Then he bolted for the cabin. Arthur, men are coming. Eleanora stepped onto the porch. Her posture, usually so graceful, was suddenly rigid. Stiff. Arthur moved beside her instinctively. Protective. The riders pulled up in a cloud of dust and steam. The lead rider was a man in his 40s, square-jawed and cold-eyed. He dismounted, ignoring Arthur entirely. Mrs. Eleanora Thornton. His voice was clipped. Formal. Thank God. The entire territory has been searching. Thornton. Arthur's mind reeled. The Thornton cattle empire. 30,000 acres over the next ridge. More wealth than most men could count. This was not the simple widow she pretended to be. Marcus, Eleanora said, her voice even. I sent word we were safe. 3 weeks ago, Marcus's gaze finally landed on Arthur, assessing and dismissing him in the same glance. This is Samuel Holloway, Eleanora said. This is my land, Arthur said, his voice hard. Is it? Marcus's smile didn't reach his eyes. Ow, fortunate for you. Sheltering my mother-in-law and nephew. Leo had hidden behind Arthur, his small hand gripping the back of his coat. The boy needed help, Arthur said. So I helped. Of course. Very noble. Marcus pulled a thick envelope from his coat. I'm prepared to compensate you generously for your trouble, Mr. Holloway. The offer was an insult. I don't want your money. Marcus's smile thinned. Everyone has a price. Name yours. Then you don't know everyone. Eleanora stepped forward. Marcus, stop. Mr. Holloway saved our lives. We were robbed by our own escorts, left to die in the blizzard. She turned to Arthur, her eyes pleading. I told him nothing, Samuel, because I didn't know if I could trust him. I didn't know who he was. Arthur felt the words like a blade. Didn't know if I could trust him. After everything. After weeks of shared meals, shared fears, shared grief. I see. Marcus's tone suggested he didn't believe a word of it. Well, regardless, it's time to leave. Mother Eleanora. Leo, we've brought a carriage. I don't want to go, Leo said, his voice shaking. Leo. He's my friend, the boy's voice cracked. Marcus grabbed Leo's arm, not gently. Enough. We are leaving. Wait. Eleanora started. But Marcus was already dragging the boy toward the horses. Leo looked back at Arthur, tears streaming down his face, his expression one of utter betrayal. Something in Arthur's chest, the part that had just started to heal, shattered completely. He wanted to fight, to stop them. But what right did he have? He was just a homesteader. They were the Thorntons. Eleanora approached Arthur, her own eyes pleading. Samuel, I should have told you the truth from the beginning. I was so frightened. I didn't know. It's fine, Arthur said, his voice flat, empty. You did what you had to do. It's not fine, Samuel. You should go, Mrs. Thornton. Your family is waiting. Her face crumpled, but she nodded. She turned away. Arthur watched them ride off. Leo twisted in the saddle, waving desperately. Arthur didn't wave back. When they were gone, he walked into his cabin. It had never been louder in its silence. 2 weeks passed. Spring bloomed, a cruel mockery. Wildflowers in the meadow. Grass greening. Birds nesting in the eaves. The world was coming alive. He was dying inside. Arthur chopped firewood obsessively, far more than he'd ever need. The thwack of the axe the only sound he could tolerate. He let the fire go cold at night. He ate beans straight from a can. He punished himself for the sin of caring, the sin of hoping. One afternoon, he was clearing the wood pile and found it. A small, carved wooden horse. Leo must have dropped it, hidden in the snow until the thaw. Arthur stared at it. He nearly threw it into the stove. But he couldn't. He sank to the floor, the small, rough horse clutched in his fist, and he wept. They were the first tears he'd shed since Eliza's death. Great, wrenching sobs that tore out of him like something physical, something being ripped out. When he was empty, he sat in the silence and heard Eliza's voice. A memory, or maybe just his own imagination. You saved them once, Arthur. Are you brave enough to be saved? They lied, he said to the empty room. They were never helpless. They were dying. That part was true. The rest doesn't matter. She didn't trust me. She barely knew you. Trust is earned. So earn it. Arthur looked at the cradle. No, the cradle wasn't there anymore. When had he moved it? He'd put in the shed weeks ago to make room for Leo's bedroll. He hadn't even noticed. The cabin was changing. He was changing. I love them, he whispered. The truth of it settled on him, heavy and light all at once. Not their money. A spring thunderstorm rolled in that evening. Thunder and lightning. Rain hammering the roof. Arthur stood outside in it, face turned up, letting the cold rain wash over him. He walked to the pine tree where Eliza and his daughter were buried. He knelt in the mud. Eliza, I don't know if you can hear me, but I think you sent them, Leo and Eleonora, not to replace you. No one could, but to remind me that love doesn't die just because people do. It just waits. It waits for us to be brave enough to try again. Lightning split the sky. Sam stood, walked back to the cabin, and packed a light bag. At dawn, he saddled his mare. He put the small wooden horse in his saddlebag. He was riding to the Thornton estate. Not for money, not for reconciliation, for truth. The Thornton estate wasn't a ranch. It was a kingdom. Arthur rode through the imposing gates mid-afternoon. His mare's hooves were loud on the packed dirt road. Ranch hands stopped working to stare at the stranger on the tired horse. The main house loomed ahead, 2 stories, white-painted, with a wraparound porch. Wealth in every plank. Arthur felt microscopic, but he didn't turn back. Marcus intercepted him at the corral, flanked by 2 armed hands. You've got nerve showing up here, Holloway. What do you want? I want to speak to Mrs. Thornton. She's not receiving visitors, especially not you. Then I'll wait. Marcus stepped closer, his voice low and menacing. Listen carefully, whatever scheme you're running. Arthur, the shout came from the house. Leo burst through the front door, running full speed. He didn't slow down. He crashed into Arthur with desperate force, arms locking around his waist. You came. Grandma said you wouldn't. But I knew you would. Arthur knelt, his arms wrapping around the boy, holding him tight. Hey, son, miss me? Leo just nodded against his shoulder, crying too hard to speak. Eleonora appeared on the porch, one hand pressed to her mouth. She descended the steps slowly, hope and fear warring in her expression. Samuel. Arthur stood, keeping one hand on Leo's shoulder. The ranch hands had gathered now, watching. Marcus looked murderous. Ma'am, Arthur said, his voice clear. I came to say something I should have said when you left. Eleonora stopped a few feet away. I'm listening. Arthur took a breath. He faced her, faced all of them. I didn't shelter you for a reward. I didn't care who you were or what you had. You needed help, and I gave it. Because that's the code a man lives by, or he's not a man at all. His voice steadied. I'd do it again tomorrow, and the day after. Eleonora's eyes shimmered. But there's more. Arthur's voice cracked just once. These past weeks, you reminded me what living is. Not just surviving. Living. I love having you in my home. I loved hearing Leo laugh. I loved. He stopped, collected himself. I loved feeling like I mattered again. Silence. Every eye was on him. Adelaide stepped closer. Samuel, I stayed those extra weeks because I was waiting. I was waiting for you to ask us not to leave. When you didn't, I thought perhaps I'd mistaken your kindness for something more. I was afraid, Arthur said, the admission tearing from his throat. Afraid you'd pity me. Afraid I wasn't enough. You are more than enough, Eleonora's voice broke. You're everything Leo needs. Everything She stopped, but Sam understood. Leo pulled Arthur's hand. Does this mean you'll stay? Or we can come back? Arthur looked at Eleonora, a real question in his eyes. I can't offer you a mansion, he said. Just a cabin. Hard work. And a man who will never stop trying to be worthy of you. Eleonora's smile was sunlight through clouds. Samuel Holloway, I don't want a mansion. I want a home. And home, she said, taking his free hand, is where you are. Marcus made a disgusted sound and stalked away. Eleonora took Arthur's hand and led him toward the porch. We have much to discuss. Partnership, land, the future. The 3 of them sat on the porch. And for the first time in 3 long, cold years, Arthur felt the weight lift. The cabin had grown, the way hearts do when they finally stop hiding. 3 months later, August heat shimmered over the meadow. Arthur's cabin now had a second room, a proper bedroom, built with timber Arthur had cut himself and Thornton ranch hands had helped raise. Arthur was foreman of the Northern Range, not charity. Partnership. Eleonora had offered to buy his land. Arthur had countered with a proposal to combine it, run cattle together, split profits fairly. She'd agreed immediately. He'd found purpose again, But more than that, he'd found family. Leo visited every weekend. His room was simple but loved. The carved horse sat on the windowsill. The boy helped with chores, rode fence lines, and laughed freely. Eleonora visited 3 times a week. Their relationship deepened slowly, respectfully. No rush, just steady. One evening in late August, Leo chased a newborn calf across the pasture, whooping with joy. Arthur lifted the boy onto his shoulders to see the sunset painting the mountains gold. Eleonora rode up on her mare, dismounted, and joined them. Her hand found Arthur's, naturally. The 3 of them watched the land turn to fire. "Arthur," Leo said from his perch, "when I grow up, can I run this ranch with you?" "Son, you'll run the whole territory if you want. But yes, we'll run it together." Eleonora squeezed Arthur's hand. "You've given him a future. You've given me a second chance." Arthur met her eyes. "You gave me a reason to take it." Leo laughed as the calf bucked, the sound carrying across the meadow like a bell. That night, after Leo was asleep, Arthur stood in his doorway. The cradle was long gone, replaced by a child's laughter, a woman's presence, a home that breathed with life. Eleonora stood beside him, her shoulder touching his. Outside, the stars emerged one by one. "Winter tests us," Eleonora said softly. Arthur nodded. "Spring proves what remains." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "And summer," Arthur smiled, feeling a peace settle deep in his bones. "Summer," he said, "is for the living." Thank you for joining us for this story of loss, lies, and the brave act of starting over. Winter tests us all in different ways, but spring always reveals what is truly strong. What did you think of Arthur's decision? Did Eleonora do the right thing by hiding her identity? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want more stories that dig deep into the human heart, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. We're so glad to have you here. We'll see you in the next one.